My name is Rachel Salamone. I'm the Chief People Officer at Boston Dynamics. I joined the company in 2019, right as we were making our transition from an R&D type of organization to a commercial organization. For those of you who don't know anything about Boston Dynamics, the company is the world leader in mobile robotics, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about what that means and especially what that means from an employment challenge standpoint as we are expanding in places that are often unplanned. Our challenge in the new markets began in about 2019, 2020, as we were initially trying to tackle some of our talent challenges. So this was initially less about our products and customers and more about wanting to access talent, in particular in Canada, where we had some former employees that wanted to come back to work for us. Not enough to really justify setting up an entity, but we did want to facilitate onboarding that talent. So at Boston Dynamics, that was our first introduction to GP. That experience was very positive for both our internal HR people, the managers of these folks, and the employees in Canada themselves. So when we started to deploy our products outside of the US, it was a natural choice for us to leverage GP to help us then hire employees in other countries that needed to be in close proximity to our customers. Robotics is a very specialized industry, and particularly, when we're looking at 2019, 2020, before the explosion of AI, finding that type of talent was not only critical, but very difficult. And one of the specialized skill sets that we needed was actually on the animation side of what we're doing. So as you're developing mobile robots, you need to visualize and animate what you intend the robot to do. And you can imagine that there are very few people in the world who specialize in robotics animation. One of them happened to be in Denmark. And we were able to partner with GP to bring this person on board after they had consulted for us for several years. They really wanted to be an employee. It certainly didn't make sense for us to set up an entity and all of that infrastructure to hire one person. But of course, we wanted to facilitate the transition for this consultant to an employee. And it was a seamless transition for us with GP. He was happy, we were happy, and it enabled us to onboard and retain this really specialized skill set and person. And he's still with us this many years later. We collectively have a lot of international experience. Things move quickly and regulations change quickly. It's great to have that baseline context, but to also have the experts at GP who can help us navigate through specific situations. In fact, we had one situation where a new hire through GP had a medical incident prior to onboarding, and it was a very complicated situation. And were it not for the guidance of GP, we probably would have made some mistakes along the way. For us, it's not just about that compliance and regulation piece. It's also about the experience of the individuals. Boston Dynamics has a really powerful brand, and anyone who's in robotics knows about Boston Dynamics. So as we are talking to them about coming on board with Boston Dynamics, they want to be employees of Boston Dynamics. And as we are talking to them about the arrangement we have with our EOR GP, we are able to tell them with confidence that they will have just as good of an experience and probably better being, employed through this partner of ours than if we were to employ them directly. They're able to get support in their own time zone, in their native tongue, with people who really understand the overall context of that country and being an employee in that country. And that has worked out really well for us. The stakes are so high. It's not only about the regulations and the country, nuances, which are numerous. You can read the regulations, but the interpretation of those is often nuanced. And having that expertise in that country where they understand those nuances is incredibly important from a risk management standpoint. But it's also important from a branding standpoint to have your employees, who are through your employer of record, have a good experience. They are often your pipeline for other new employees. And if they don't have a good experience, that pipeline dries up. Google can tell you a lot of things. ChatGPT can tell you a lot of things, but there are certain nuances that are impossible to understand if you aren't immersed in that culture in that region. So having that in-country presence and expertise is part of not only the compliance side, but the employee experience side. It makes more sense for us to continue with GP than to try to set up our own entity on costs alone. But then when you consider the employee experience aspect, the undertaking to open an entity, maintain that entity, and the reporting that's required, all of the things that are required. Even if you have people in country to do that, and you've hired people in country to do that, there is still an impact on your headquarter functions, if you will. So for me to not have to think about all of the various filings from an employer standpoint that we would have to comply with, it's not just a cost savings, but it's a bandwidth savings. And we have 100% confidence. I don't even think about, are we complying with all of these country regulations? I can tell our chief legal officer and our compliance counsel, this is the last thing you have to think about. And, we brought our compliance counsel into these conversations. She is, very familiar with our arrangement with GP, and she also feels incredibly confident that we don't need to worry about this. And that is worth a lot to us at this stage of our evolution. We've been in this a few years now, and we've had just a great experience and a great partnership. Anytime people are involved, of course, things go wrong and you have problems and challenges to solve. And we just feel like there's so much trust. There's incredible responsiveness from GP. Everyone we talk to has a partnership mindset, and there hasn't been a situation that we haven't been able to work through successfully together. I had prior experience with GP in my last company. It's not because we're Boston Dynamics that we get, this special treatment. It feels like we get special treatment from GP. It's always felt that way. And coming over to Boston Dynamics, I didn't feel the need to even consider another EOR because we were so pleased with our experience and the experience of our employees in my prior company. So I would part by saying, if you are considering going with an employer of record and you're not already using GP, they're the best out there.